Okay. Excellent. All right, so let's call the council committees meeting and who's that is. Okay. Council meeting and budget to order for Tuesday. Can we maybe if it's through your computer, so is it that your microphone is on?
No, I'm off. Okay. So I would say yours.
The Ed DeMerit's my favorite town.
Test. Sounds good. Okay.
Technological.
Okay.
All right, test. You got it.
Can you hear it?
Great.
Can Jeremy still hear?
Jeremy, can you hear us? All shows that all counts. We have subcommittee agendas tonight. So let's start right off.
I understand here a brief presentation or discussion from Bird Scooters. A copy of presentation slides, and given the time we're going to spend on budgets, having a brief discussion. Mr. Lynch today and actual formal presentation. We choose to go that route. So that Mr. Lynch, could you introduce the three to that?
Sure. Sorry, you're kind of cutting in and out. As long as can you all hear me very clearly? That was a yes. Sorry. Can you all still hear me?
Can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, great. So why don't I just start? And then I know that you're short on time. I don't want to run through all those slides because that would take way too long. So I'll just give you kind of a brief synopsis of Bird and then kind of run just a couple over a couple of the details and then allow everyone to ask questions. I think it'd probably be a little more productive that way instead of listening to me prattle on with the slide after slide after slide. Yes.
Yeah.
Shoot, it's cutting in and out so much. Like if you're speaking, I can't hear it, yep. Unfortunately. You know what? I'm going to log off and log back on. Maybe that'll help from my end. Why don't I try that? Okay.
Thank you for your patience.
anyone do any good jokes?
Yeah. I'm not going to. Yeah.
Could someone try again? Let's see.
Let's try that.
Heard that.
Yep, so open, I think there are some things in there that need to be changed.
Okay, why don't I at least start and see if I can't hear you, that I won't be able to hear you. That could be a problem. But as long as you can hear me, I'll start and see how it goes from there. So as the originator of the shared scooter industry, Bird has, we've always been at the forefront of innovation, from designing, engineering, and building our own vehicles in-house to developing software for our vehicles and the Bird mobile app. We've been mute. Okay. I wasn't muted. Oh boy. I swear I've done this 100 times. Hi.
Now.
Can you guys hear me now? Because I've been unmuted this whole time, at least on my end, it says.
Stop instantly after you, after you say it. So,
yeah, it's still sketchy on my end too. Dang it. Maybe if I called in.
It's not, there's some setting.
I think that's going to do it if you call in. What do you say?
It's not going to do anything if I call in? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's from our end.
Okay. Well, if it seems like we're at a technical impasse, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Unfortunately, this is it's not helping you all out. That's it.
Do you have the Facebook stream on your computer?
No.
I have it on my phone.
There you go.
Okay, this just is not working.
I see what's happening. Good to go?
Try that.
That's it?
You sure?
Jeremy, can you hear me okay?
I can. And not
There we
every
go.
fifth word. That's great.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Mitch.
Thank you, Mitch. Thank you, Belle. And thank you, Jeremy. So we, Jeremy, if you give us your presentation and accept our apologies for our technical challenges, we will be happy to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
No, thank you. I was just trying to call Sophie to be like, do you want me to bail? This could be a lost cause. But yeah, so in order to keep things brief, because I know we just ran a little late, I normally in front of city council meetings don't like to go through a presentation that's 15 to 20 slides long. That takes up way too much time. I thought I'd just kind of run through a couple of the highlights, because I know there's probably lots of questions that I'll probably be answering some of those slides in those questions. So I maybe a better use of our time if you think that's okay.
Sure. Are you asking if we want to just ask questions of what was in your PowerPoint slide?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go through a couple of things real quick here, and then we can go right to that. How's that?
You guys have all seen, I don't think they're presented with agenda items on the public.
They were, but,
They were? Okay.
but some people might not have gone through that.
Yeah. In the event, if you could give us a quick synopsis of your program, and then we can ask some questions based on what we hear and what we saw in the slides, that'd be great.
Sure. So, our objective is, basically when we started this business in 2017, is to get people out of cars and trying to find another mode of sustainable transportation. Scooters is what we first started with in 2017, and we basically evolved that product into basically a computer on wheels, as it were now. Our Bird 3 has over 200 sensors on the scooter itself to be operating. It's really quite an achievement for us. Our objective is to provide an affordable mobility option to residents to encourage that mode shift from cars to some other form of transportation. We're also, with our new fleet manager model, supporting economic growth through the city by helping residents and students patronize more in local businesses, and also the local fleet manager who is running our Old Town program for the second season now is a local resident, and is, those fleet managers receive a decent portion of the revenue for all the rides that get taken place with every scooter. So that revenue is staying home and invested locally as well. And by adding on a program to the south, it would only add to his adding a couple other people to help manage the program as well. So adding more investment into labor in the community as well. We've invested in building a long-term sustainable relationship with our cities and university partners in markets all over the U.S. We work collaboratively to deliver safe, equitable, and sustainable mobility options for all. Our team looks forward to doing the same in Orono, and we'll work tirelessly to be a trusted community partner to the city and local stakeholders. Now, the agreement that we have in place with Old Town, that we try to do the same with Orono, would be a 1-year agreement. It is a pilot agreement, so it has a beginning and end date. This business is purely seasonal. So, we would come on, if we did something this year, we'd come on the ground probably in August, come off in October, early November, depending upon the weather, and then come back out when weather would allow. End of March, I'm in Massachusetts, so end of March, early April, it really is dependent upon the weather. The scooters would come back out and then stay through the summer. And then again, that's how that works. So any program you'd see would probably be between 6 and 7 months in length. No scooters stay out in the Northeast, and I have programs in Manchester and Nashua, Pittsfield, soon to be Gardner, West Springfield, a bunch in New York too, that they all come off the ground around the same time and go back out as soon as weather would allow. There's no investment required from the city. You would have a dedicated account manager as well as myself to help manage the program. We provide the data and a data dashboard to the city and to anybody that would like access to it in the city government. What that does is it gives you an idea of, first of all, you'd be able to see where all the scooters are currently at any given time during the day. You'd be able to see rides as far back as 3 months on any given day, the number of rides, the distances they traveled, the amount of CO2 that was saved, everything you would want to know about the rides. Plus, as well as you get to see the heat maps of those rides as well, which is very important because it's one of the things that our fleet managers use to determine where to place scooters during the morning, where to rebalance them during the day and rebalance them at night, so that they're only putting them in places where they're going to get rides. And that data is really what helps us, it drives us to find those locations. So they're not guessing on where to put scooters where they're going to get rides. They know where they're going to get rides and get picked up, because the fleet manager's motivated simply because they get paid with every ride that gets taken. So they want to make sure they're putting them in places where they're going to be used and keeping them out of areas where they're just not going to get rides. Doesn't make sense to put them there. And the data that you see and the data that the fleet manager sees is one of the things that we use to achieve that. The number of vehicles we were talking about to begin with would be around 75. Generally, what that means is about 2/3 of those out on the busier days. A third of those are generally kept back and in full charge. So when the fleet manager is rebalancing scooters during the day, they're taking out fully charged scooters and replacing the scooters that are down on charge. As an FYI, any scooter that is below 20% of charge disappears from the app and is unable to be ridden. So once it goes below a certain charge, then it's basically, it alerts the fleet manager they have to go out and pick it up, and it's unavailable to be reserved by a member. It also happens, the same thing happens whenever a community member reports through community mode, which is a way that you can, through the app, basically report to us that a scooter was damaged, a scooter is on private property or improperly parked. As soon as someone reports that to us, the scooter comes offline. It's unable to be reserved, and the fleet manager instantly gets a notice on their phone that they need to go pick up a scooter because it is knocked over, damaged on private property, whatever it may be. So they're immediately notified when they have to go retrieve the scooter. And it's one of the ways that members and non-members alike can alert us to any of those kind of situations, because the last thing we want is we don't want DPW or anybody in city government having to be responsible for the scooters. That is our responsibility, especially with law enforcement as well. We don't want to add to their daily responsibilities. That's why the fleet manager's local, so they can take care of those problems quickly, and all those situations that arise, good, bad, or indifferent, get reported to BIRD and not to anyone else to manage. There is a specific operating zone. So we have one set up in Old Town. We'd have one separate for Orono as well, where if the scooter runs out of that or is taken out of that zone, it basically comes to a stop. It's not able to be operated after that. So just as an example, 3 blocks before or half a, quarter mile before 95, that's where the operating area could end, so that it can't go outside that corridor. It only exists in a certain operating area. We create that zone with the city itself. So determining where that is, where scooters are able to be ridden and where they're not. So if a scooter leaves the zone, the fleet manager knows it and it can't operate outside of it. So it really would stay within the operating areas. Any kind of launch date we'd be thinking of would be sometime in August, if it's a possibility to coincide with the students coming back to school. And there would be an MOU I prefer an operating agreement. I think I may have shared that with Sophie or Bell. The operating agreement lays more out of the roles and responsibilities of BIRD. An MOU is generally a very basic agreement, but also one of the more important things in either document is that there is insurance in that insurance and liability coverage in the agreement. And also it talks about, it's a separate paragraph on indemnification for the city, as well as it's one of the things we'd also do is name the city as additional insured on our COI. So that agreement has all those details in it that I'm sure your legal counsel would want to see firsthand and foremost. That's just a brief synopsis. I don't want to go too far, so I can start to entertain questions if anybody would like.
Thank you very much for that summary. Does anyone on the council first have any questions?
I'm curious if in other areas where there are towns next to each other that have this same program, you've worked toward operability across town lines. I'm just thinking about how many students we have who live in Old Town but come to school in Orono, and the possibility for this to be, for that to be a synergy if there was opportunity to work with Old Town on that.
That's exactly what we would do. We do the exact same thing. Open it up so that because what we'd want to do is have that FM control both sets of scooters, the ones for Orono and the ones for Old Town, and having that open up so that that's really what the objective would be with Maine, is to allow students to get from off campus to campus to alleviate any parking issues they may have or overflow they may have, give students another option to get instead of having to take their cars to campus. So yeah, that would be a synergy we would look to absolutely have.
Yep.
Just maybe internal question. If we say yes, it carries on to UMaine as well.
Not necessarily. The university would have to agree. They can geofence around the boundary of UMaine. And I know that they've had conversations with UMaine. I know that our staff had some conversation with UMaine so that they were aware that we were looking at doing this.
And we've done so on a lot of other university campuses. We understand that there's a general large walkway or an area that's really heavily confluent with students between classes. And a lot of times we just section that area off as an operating zone that you cannot operate, park or ride the scooter through. And what we really want to achieve is just getting to campus. So whether that be, to the first parking lots or the first bus lots or things like that. I generally find on campuses that aren't, like when my daughter went to IU, that's a much larger campus. So there is some intra-campus traveling. I don't see this as an intra-campus kind of route, just because the rides would be too short. I see it more of getting on and getting off campus and allowing on-campus students to get into town to spend money and things like that, not necessarily as one intra-campus. So we wouldn't be looking at, when we try to get something done with UMaine, it would be more on the outskirts, not necessarily having all the routes across campus. If that
Last question. Liability wise, I assume we have none.
We would have none. And if somebody can sue you for anything. Doesn't matter if you're responsible or not. But when he says they would indemnify, hold us harmless, and name us as an additional insured, means that we wouldn't have to defend ourselves. Their insurance company would have to.
Thanks.
How have we heard, how is Old Town? We must have a point of contact in Old Town. How long have they been doing it over there?
So Belle had a conversation with Old Town. They did a pilot, a 1-year pilot, just like we're contemplating. It went fairly well, and they are signing up for another year. So they are on year 2 of a 1-year pilot.
And then does the facility manager work daily to the point where, so bikes aren't left, scooters aren't left, they're scooters, do we call them scooters? They're not like strewn around in front of, people's homes or on streets and things like that. They're moved back to places. You can take them one way, right? So I can take it from here to my house and leave it there, and someone's going to come pick it up and put it back somewhere more prominent than that.
Exactly. So they're basically, so what they work, it's kind of a, fleet managers get into a rhythm, meaning that where the scooters are placed early in the morning, they put them out there in those areas because they're going to elicit rides at that hour of the morning from those particular areas. At the end of, like when you get towards lunchtime, they're putting them out in places where, a town hall, hospital, places of business, things like that, where they know people are going to come out and want to ride to maybe go to lunch or to go someplace. They're going to move them to those locations. At the end of the day, differently, they're again where they were early in the morning. So yeah, they are going to be out actively moving those scooters around, rebalancing them. If one ends up in a neighborhood because you wanted to take one home for the night, it may sit there overnight, or it may sit there for a couple hours. The fleet manager will give it some time to see if it's going to make its way back. But what generally happens once they realize certain neighborhoods where a scooter may end up, they're never going to get a ride back from there. They'll probably go out right away, grab it and bring it back and set it back live in the area where they know it's going to get a ride again. Because again, idle scooters to them is lost revenue. They want to keep them in motion as much as possible, and just having them idly sit is not something that they ever want to do.
And there are we have areas like in the downtown. I think about, in front of Ampersand or, Family Dollar. I mean, they're going to be places where there are racks. Will they use regular bike racks, or will they use a different kind of structure so they're, stacked neatly? Or
yeah, so they can use. We would look to use any of the existing bike racks that are available in the community. We'd also look to, if it's a private apartment building or condominium complex, something like that, look to work with them to find an area inside that parking area where they would be able to find, a convenient area where they would be able to place 4 or 5 at a time. You're not going to see them placed any more than probably 2 to 4 together. That's what they're told. They're not to stack any more than that in a particular area. So in the furniture zone, at or near a bike rack, what we can also do is create parking pins in the app, so it's a virtual parking spot. They can see where the suggested parking is and where we'd like them to have them park the scooters, so that they can actually see where they're supposed to be and park them in those locations. We can do that in town. And it's one of the parts of the launch process is getting to know the area through the community to find out what areas you think would be popular, where to create those virtual parking locations, so that we kind of have that stuff mapped out. And then through marketing and through the in-app push messages, constantly reminding riders like where to park when they're in downtown, what areas of that. And then we can always send out messages to those that reported improperly parked. You need to park better. You can't park it here, things of that nature. Those are the things we do as the program matures.
Any more questions from councilors, or is it appropriate to ask if staff have any questions or comments?
I don't think staff does. I think we brought this forward. I think the thought is this is a business that would like to do something. It does require some agreement with the town because of the overlap on public ways, and you'd be making some agreements that were in the proposed agreement, where you're agreeing not to make that they're going to be a sole source provider, at least for the first year. We're not going to regulate them any differently than we regulate bicycles, that kind of stuff.
It's great. And I know that we've got public comment at the end of the committee session. So members of the public, would that be the right time for members of the public who want to be heard on it?
Public comment now.
Yeah. Anyone have any questions from the public that while we still have Jeremy with us? Sure, Eric.
Can I just stand here?
Yeah, please. You would just introduce yourself if you would to Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy. My name's Eric. And one question I had was regarding safety and compliance with local laws that generally control what cyclists can do so they stay safe. Sidewalk use, conflicts with pedestrians. Maybe Belle mentioned it, something to you, Sophie, about how that's gone in Old Town. How's that gone in other places, Jeremy?
So sidewalk use is one of the things it's one of the things that's written on the scooters, no sidewalk riding. So it's not something we promote. We actually insist that our riders do not ride on sidewalks. So that's one of the things that's part of the opening tutorial whenever a rider has to join, is there's no riding on sidewalks. We haven't had an issue in Old Town with the sidewalk riding. As far as safety goes, I don't recall any incidences off the top of my head. What we have found in much larger markets like a Baltimore or a Dallas or DC, things like that, what they have seen when they've done their safety studies is it's no more than bicycle accidents. So they're very comparable as far as the number of bike accidents as well as scooter accidents. So with the number of scooters that we're talking about, and given what I appreciate, especially in a university segment, is that there are operational hours. So these scooters would only be active from 5 a.m. to midnight, and they would shut down after that. So after at 12 o'clock, you cannot reserve a scooter any longer. And so they basically just, if there are any out, they disappear from the app and they're just a paperweight. You can't reserve it. You can't move it without an alarm going off. So it really helps cut down on safety by ceasing late night operations. We found that to be helpful. That's something we institute. It's something that's negotiable if someone wants to go later, but I always like to start earlier because, again, it's having 2 college-age kids. I know exactly what that's like. And most of them don't even go out before midnight, but still, it certainly helps with that safety aspect of it. Thanks, Eric. Hopefully I answered your question.
With that, I guess what would be our next steps for?
So normally you would either say you need more information and tell me in general what that is so that we can collect it and bring it back to you, or you'd move it forward to a council meeting for formal consideration. So that is when we would do the full presentation and review of the agreement.
Do you have a question? We have one more question from our audience.
Yes, hi, my name is Claire Ackroyd. I'm just wondering if we can see what one of these things looks like. Anybody got a picture of one?
I could.
Yeah, there's a picture and has all the specs on the presentation right there.
Oh, it's just that. Okay.
Yeah, the top speed's 15 miles an hour. It weighs between 45 and 50 pounds, so it is actually quite heavy. It's not off the shelf, kind of an Amazon kind of scooter you may see on the road. It's definitely built for commercial use and daily use by a lot of members. So we've made sure that we've built a pretty good mousetrap there.
Great. Oh, there we go. Look at that.
There's a picture there up on the screen. I'm pretty sure that's not Orono, Jeremy.
No.
Appreciate
Palm
you trying.
the way.
Yeah.
So I would be supportive of this going forward. I am also grateful that we have so many members of the public here tonight. And I'm curious if you'd be willing to weigh in with this sounds interesting to think about more, or I don't love this idea, or I'd really want more information, kind of quick temperature check from the room. Yeah, all right, I'm seeing a fair amount of support for council to move this forward and consider it. And so that's where I would land on this. I'm curious what other folks think.
Yeah, I'd like to move forward.
Great.
Yep, I think that's great. I love the flash vote concept. So with that, I guess pending we do this by straw poll, right? So it's a sort of unless anyone's got a strong objection, we'll move it to the July. Okay. So suggested.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Great. And Jeremy, thank you so much. So I assume staff will be in touch with you about talking with us in July, and that'll be a point where we'd make a formal agreement.
Fabulous. Thanks very much. I appreciate your time and the patience in working the tech out. Thank you very much.
And with that, I think that closes the Community Development Committee portion of the agenda.
We're going to move into Finance and Operations Committee. Councilor Kenny's going to handle item A, and I'm going to talk about item B.
So yeah. Item A, council meeting schedule for July through September 2023. I guess we'll just probably hand this. You obviously got the schedule in our packet. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Sophie, to that.
So it's following the same pattern that we have been following, which is to maintain all committees meetings on Mondays, council meeting, workshops, all kind of on Mondays, starting at 5 o'clock, and avoiding the dates of important religious holidays. It also is recognizing that we would not meet in August until August 28th. So you would take 3 weeks off.
Right. I really like that our work is contained to Mondays in the summer. So I really like the cadence and schedule. And I like that it gives the public understanding of what days we're here. So it's not, oh, is this a Wednesday week or a Thursday week? So I like that a lot. And I appreciate you putting it together.
All right.
So based on this, I will plot out the work plan for committee chairs to evaluate and make changes to.
Item B is allocating a budget, reviewing scope of work for staff, DEI, collaborative work. We had a couple senior staff members recently attend some training. I think Deputy Chief Merrill is going to speak to that first, and Lori join.
Yeah, so Dan Merrill, obviously I'm the Deputy Police Chief for the Police Department. Lori and I kind of just wanted to come here tonight and let you guys know that in early April, both her and I went down to a diversity and inclusion training that was hosted by MMA down in Augusta. It was a full 8-hour training, and it was hosted by Dustin Ward, who has a private consulting company that's called It Is Time. I think having gone down there for the day and networked with there was a diverse group of people there. There was police officers there, and there were representatives from all over the state and different encompassing disciplines, public works people. I think there were town managers and people from all over. So we were able to network with some of them, and there were some group activities where we were able to actually speak with the town manager and some of the people that work for Falmouth, who's taking him on as a client. And they've had a very positive experience with Dustin's work and being able to integrate this into the fiber and the culture of what it is Falmouth does and how they hire and how they just integrate this system into their town. So Lori and I went to the class, like I said, we networked a little and then we were on the way back just talking and we're like, this really seems like something that would be worthwhile to bring back here. Staff's had a bunch of training. Sophie's had us do a bunch of training, police departments had training, different sections of departments have had various trainings on implicit bias and equity and inclusion and all that, but training is training. If we want to really move the needle, what Lori and I talked about was we need to do something more. And with the feedback that we got, we think that it would be prudent to look into bringing Dustin on as a consultant. We just went to the training late in April, so it wasn't something we were able to bring forward necessarily as a budget item for this year. But Sophie could speak to it more. We have some unexpended funds that we could talk about, maybe utilizing pull forward into FY24 to cover the costs for his services if it was something that you guys thought was worthwhile. Covered most of it?
You did a great job. Great. Yeah, covered it all. We were both just really impressed with how well Dustin interacted with the diverse group there. All departments were represented. He's so non-judgmental, very easy to listen to, talk to. He did a fabulous job. And we were both incredibly impressed with him. So. And I think if for those, hopefully all of you took the time to look forward or look through his statement of work, I think that speaks to the type of product that he brings forward. It's very thorough. He's charismatic and he engages well. So we're hoping that with this program, this consulting service, it will resonate with all of staff. We're not looking for it just to be a public safety thing or a library thing. We want something that can hopefully cut through to all the staff in town. And so, Lori at the library and me at public safety, we're can be opposite sides of the spectrum. It worked for both of us. We're like, hey, I think it can work for everybody.
So I think for people who may not have read the full scope, what Dustin offers is different than training. What Dustin is offering is 3 separate, spread out half-day workshops with all of our staff that would be working that day. And we try to schedule them so that we could work some of our public safety people in. Bringing public safety back for a half-day training is very expensive. And while this is very important, we're going to really work with him to identify different ways to get them engaged. We'll be engaged, but just try to kind of. So the goal is to look at everybody within the organization and really impart ownership and engagement for building a culture in looking at how we deliver services and work with each other through a DEI lens. What I like about his method, when you think about adult learning and professional development, it is not usually a one and done. It's take bits, take bites, and practice and come back. I like the fact that we'll be doing the work, the senior staff team and a core team with just individuals from departments will be meeting regularly and evaluating and bringing things back. I also served on, just so you know, I served on a committee with Dustin, so I am aware, and he has a very eclectic background. He's born and raised in Holistic County, lives now in Southern Maine, is an elected official, represents the BIPOC community. So I was just very taken with him and meets people where they are and just helps them kind of look at things a little differently. So because police, so we've been bemoaning the fact that the police department has been so understaffed for the year, but that has left us with a significant balance of unexpended funds. I think there's something a little poetic about the police department paying for this training and speaking to the commitment that Dan has when he offered up the funds. So there are 2 options. One is $8,700 to only work with staff in a very internal effort. I would actually recommend that we work with the $12,400 option, which is it's got 20, it's got 6 additional hours for community engagement. That is not about the community building a DEI program. If you read the background, what he's really trying to do is go out into the community to get feedback about operations for staff. So this is not, the intent of this is to be very internally focused. Not to say council might not and DEI committee might not want to come up with something else, but I don't want to overstep my role. And it would seem that this is in keeping with priorities I've heard from.
Great. Questions or comments from councilors?
I reviewed the plan of work and I thought it looked really great. So thank you for bringing this opportunity to us. The plan for how to pay for it sounds really great to me. And I think my 2 sort of questions or pieces of feedback were, does the town council get to be part of this process and participate in the plan of work in some way?
I think so. I think, so Dustin is taking the summer off. Okay. So we're going to start our work formally in September. Mm-hmm. He is still kind of working through how to navigate Orono. And I would think that any major introspective piece that staff does has to kind of include council. Right. I just am not, we're not exactly sure what we want to propose, but we would propose something.
Yeah. That would be lovely. We'd love to see council get to be part of what sounds like a really wonderful opportunity. And then I also think it would be a wonderful utilization of our existing resources to just run this by our own DEIB committee first and tell them that we're considering this and give them the opportunity to give council feedback on whether they agree that this seems like kind of a great opportunity for us. And with the timeline, it looked like we were going to make a decision by the 30th. So we have time to email them all and ask them to review a proposal.
As long as as long as you're okay with it being just an email and let me know if you have concerns, kind of.
Does that sound okay to everyone?
Yeah, I think it's very, it's great.
Yeah, I think one of our goals with the DEIB committee is to invite them to engage with council as often as possible. So that would be really good.
Just to clarify, you said the $12,400 option, is that basically for 18 hours? Is that correct? 3 4-hour sessions?
No, it's for 26 hours total because there's also Zoom meetings with the core team. You put in monthly or bi-monthly.
And it also includes the community piece as well.
So just to make sure we understand the mechanics, this would show up on your July agenda to carry forward the $12,400 if that's the one you go with, and also to engage in for this work as a sole source vendor.
So that was my question. So we'd have to approve the use of a sole source vendor because we're not calling it. Okay.
And what's the duration of the work? Is it the whole year?
It's for a year. And the thought is that by February, March, we should have a pretty good idea of our progress. And if this is something that in Falmouth, I think they did a big push and then have kind of, as they've grown, have kind of brought it back to kind of maintenance and check-ins and around certain issues. So the cost kind of comes down. We would look at if that's still a priority and it's working, building that in the budget next year for your consideration.
I love that. I love that the police department is involved in funding it and bringing it to us in the library too, but particularly the police department. I love that there'll be integration with the DEIB committee. And I like that you flag that as an opportunity for engagement with that committee. So I'm very supportive of this and I thank you for bringing it forward.
I think one of the strengths of this program to me is that it's really based in action steps. And a lot of our training is, we train ourselves how to think and behave, but sometimes it doesn't reach the interface with the public. And I think this is really forward facing. So I think it's a great program in that. All right, any public comment from the public? No? Okay, so we have oh yes, please.
I've lived in Orono 31 years and I'm just really excited to hear that this is an investment that the town is going to make. So
second that. Okay. So that concludes Finance and Operations Committee, subcommittee work. We do have a town manager report before we move on.
So I'm going to abbreviate this incredibly so that we can get on to the other stuff. But I do want to let you know that the pool opened on Monday. Based on our current level of staffing and 2 people who applied that are certified lifeguards. We will be adding Sunday hours. I'm not sure exactly what they will be, but we'll be adding Sunday hours, and there is a plan for swim lessons. It will be delayed just a little bit because there's a class that the lifeguards have to take that are going to be teaching the course, but it won't be delayed significantly. I also want to make you aware the auditors were here this week for the interim audit. They enjoyed their 2 days on site. They met with Council Chair Wingard and they left with everything that they need. So we won't hear back from them until September when we'll do the remote audit for a week. The big news is that we received a message from Penobscot Regional Communications Center, which is the dispatch, last week, letting us know that the commissioners were going to be having a meeting today, talking about massive staff shortage in dispatch right now. They are funded for 34 positions. They currently have 19, and in 3 weeks, they're planning to go to 17. They're having a really hard time attracting and retaining people. It's a vicious cycle because as they lose people, people are required to work more overtime, which then causes them to lose more people. There was a meeting today. Captain McLaughlin from the fire department and I went down. I was a little concerned when I went back and listened to the workshop that happened last week because it seemed not really practical, and that there was, I think, a little bit of hyperbole. Would that be a good word? Kind of. And so we had a good conversation with the county manager before the meeting. They went in and they gave a nice presentation aimed at what are the short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions. The point I made to the commission is that we're getting ready to make out a check for almost $850,000 for our county taxes. And we do a lot of things very self-sufficient here. When we are down in our public safety, we rely more on Penobscot Regional Dispatch. The one area, and I did comment because the commissioners were, one of the proposals was to not renew the Penobscot County PRCC contract with Aroostook County because they were concerned that Aroostook County would have to pay more, and just shared with them that we've seen this happen with EMS where there are a couple of larger communities that provide EMS so other people can get it cheap, and it's stretching all of the resource. And that I really felt like Penobscot County needed to take care of Penobscot County first. And that dispatch is probably one of the higher priority services we get from the county. They were very receptive and of course are very concerned about our concerns. They are gonna offer a pilot retention premium pay of an additional $2 and are looking for AI, so artificial intelligence, to help screen business calls from 911 calls. I've had conversation with Chief Merrill to talk about are there ways that we can put in a bit of a tree here to get people used to making their non-emergency calls here as opposed to shipping them to dispatch. It is overloading dispatch, and that makes emergencies maybe not get the attention that they would need. So we're evaluating that, and when we have more, we'll talk with Dan about a communication strategy.
People are calling 911 more than they should.
911 is not the issue.
Okay.
So when people call 866-4000, if we don't have a clerical person here, it automatically just transfers over to dispatch.
Okay.
And so that could be my dog is missing to, hey, what time is the bike rodeo? Or are you doing a drug disposal program this year? And so what we want to do is get rid of the, I lost my wallet calls going to dispatch. We want them. We want the calls here.
Yeah.
So we're just talking about how we could best employ technology in a way that will get information to officers that are on duty without having to go through dispatch.
Someone left a scooter in front of my house. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
75, I just heard.
Yeah. You had a chance. We offered you a chance to say no. Yeah.
Thibodeau
Yes,
has a question. I'm going to allow her to talk.
thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Thibodeau.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I actually had raised my hand during the public comment for the DEI portion of the meeting. So is it okay if I make comment on that?
Yeah, it doesn't pop up on our screen. I'm sorry we missed it.
That's okay. So I just am hopeful that the council will consider adding accessibility to their DEI work. I did not see that in the proposal from the gentleman that you are considering consulting with, nor do I see it as part of your the town committee on DEIB, I guess is what you refer to as. And but I just think it's really important to include people with disabilities and access, but B, reasonable accommodations, and hopeful that when the town is considering work moving forward, they include that part of our population. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's an important note.
I can just speak to that briefly to say that we have a member of the management team right now who is doing a certificate program in accessibility inclusion in the workplace. So that should give us some tools, and that's a really good point to add to the rest.
Isn't it also true that we had someone, at least on the ad hoc DEIB committee, that was really there representing that voice, Sonia?
Yeah, there is on the present DEIB committee too. There's someone who has a mobility difference of ability and represented on the committee, who is really cognizant of that and bringing a lot of awareness to our process for that new committee. So I really appreciate the feedback because it is important and it's something that we'll we'll strive to continue prioritizing. Thank you.
I'll also say that it is in fact part of the town's DIB committee's charge to care for those issues. Not to say that's not important to keep raising it. I'm going to sort of assuage some concerns if there are out there that is part of the charge of our committee.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else in the manager's report?
No,
Well,
as soon as the budget is done, I'll get another report out to you.
we talked about schedules.
Yes, we do. I have two things. One is we have had a request, more than one over the last year, to evaluate a charter change to change the date of the election. When I talked to Councillor Demerit about that, there is, he asked about staff, like, is there a staff issue why that couldn't happen? And the answer is no. The only issue that you have is a timeline issue. So if this was something you want to evaluate, it would be good for staff to be able to do some background for you and to be able to schedule this probably a July meeting, because I think you're going to have public hearings in October, November-ish. And I would want to make sure that we had opportunity for full council discussion around that matter. So if that's something you want to put on the agenda, happy to do that. Just want feedback from the group.
What are we talking about changing?
talking about changing the municipal election to a different time. And that.
So it's not during March, during the winter, when sometimes the students on campus are on spring break and faculty might be on spring break too. So it makes it it's possible that a different timing of elections, say November, when people are primed for there to be a big election, we might see higher voter turnout. So I think it'd be worth considering.
So, and the idea here is not saying we're going to do it, but
right.
rather you're
right.
letting me know so that I can prepare to support a conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's important. I'd like to have a conversation for both all the reasons I identified when I was like running in March, but also some of the issues I've identified since I got on the council in the middle of our budget process and the timing that goes, inherent with that and the challenges that, particularly when there's a significant turnover of counselors and just the challenge that everybody has getting up to speed and getting to know each other and things like that.
The other item that we talked about that I think we want to talk about as part of perhaps our carry forward or our assigned fund balance allocation, which happens, those conversations usually happen in July or the late August meeting, is the town council has been talking a lot about wanting to engage the community. And there are some tools that we could use to help you do that in a statistically relevant way. I've been doing some investigation. I've got some information to share with Councillor Demerit, but I told him that I would vote the seed that we're looking, I think, to have an engagement pilot. It is not cheap, but I think we could reallocate some of our assigned fund balance to cover that.
I was excited about it, so thank you. Yeah.
I did just want to acknowledge the rec staff for getting where we currently have arrived at with staffing on the pool. I think up against it, and it's great to hear that we're talking about lessons and open on the weekends. So appreciate that.
I was part of a real-time Facebook collaboration with a citizen who had questions about buying a ticket online, and then the citizen was informed. The citizen tagged me into the conversation because that's who she is, and she likes to tag me on all sorts of things. But she's a friend in addition to being a resident, and Parks and Rec was very responsive, like in the moment. I think it was evening, back and forth in the comment section, and let her know that there's a cash box option, right? So that was really alleviated the concerns. I went through the process and bought a ticket, so I've got my first visit to the pool covered when that time comes, and found it to be something you couldn't navigate, maybe not with the ease of like an Amazon purchase, but at the same time it was, but I'm glad the cash option's there as well.
We do on our agenda have an opportunity for public comment now. I will say we will also have opportunities for public comment as we go through the budget. So thank you both for. So if there is anybody in council chambers who would care to make a public comment prior to us going into our budget discussion, Al, please. You can just stay where you are, just talk.
Okay, I'm Alan Lewis. Overall comment about the whole budget process. First of all, thank you. I think it's been a difficult process this year, and I appreciate all the work that council and staff is putting into it. Just from reading the summary that the council put up, for which I thank you. I mean, it looks like there's basically a talk about the CESB, the current expanded services budget, versus a new proposal for Orono values budget. And I guess I just want to take a step back and say that I really appreciate the look into multi-year trend analysis into the past. I think that when it comes to sustainability, what really matters is multi-year trend analysis into the future, which of course is harder. You don't know if the county is going to do something you didn't anticipate, right? You don't know if COVID is going to happen. And I also understand that the council approves budgets year by year. This factors into the whole discussion about when the election should be, so that new members come in early enough in the process. In Augusta, fiscal notes project out anticipated impacts into the budget biennium and into the subsequent budget biennium, which is looking potentially up to 4 years out. I think that that's the kind of thing you should be looking at going forward. So I just want to say I endorse the council's examination of multi-year trends And I suggest that you consider further amending your process so that starting next year, I understand you can't do it in the middle of the process when it's practically July 1st. You look into getting some multi-year projections into the future of, what the current council's ideas are about where you might go. Understanding that you're going to probably have some placeholders for, for expenses that you don't know what they're going to be, but you're going to want to look at trends in the past to see how much funds you can set aside for, for special projects. And that you let staff know, as soon as possible in the summer so they can get ready for it. So that next year you can have everything that you need to follow that new process. And, share it with the public so that people like me can react to it. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, so we'll stop for public comment along the way. I think our first item of business tonight is some slides that Councilor Demerit and other put together and other councilors have commented on, with the idea of clarifying council's priorities as we've developed this budget, as we've struggled to develop a budget this year. So I'll let Councilor Demerit, I'll hand that off to him.
This is my first time sharing here, so I apologize if start the slideshow from the beginning. And I want to thank Chair Wingard for that and the opportunity to share this with you today. We've had 9 budget hearings, over the course of the process. We'll have 9 budget hearings, many questions, and a lot of new members of the council. And a council where we had 3 members of the council who were here in January to start the process and set the priorities for staff and town manager. And then those 3 of those councils aren't with us now today. So there's been movement. So we kind of wanted to, in 10 minutes, which, maybe 11, we committed to giving an overview of kind of the priorities that we saw and the observations we saw, members of the public, that builds on the work that Sophie Wilson did for us last week with her presentation and the very good work she's done, digging into many questions that we've had from all of our different perspectives and our newness to the process. So with that, we don't also, this is a dress rehearsal. We don't get to meet together. We avoid each other. We like each other, but we avoid each other in town because we're not allowed to meet together outside of ones at a time. So this is done by 1 email, 1 phone call at a time. And, so this is our first pass at this. So with that, Sarah, do you want to take the first slide?
Okay, got it. Okay, so our first slide is showing us the increase in our budget over the last 4 years. So you see data back to FY20 up to our first proposed budget for FY24. The number I think that's very important is it's 4.1 million at the bottom of that screen that we've grown. The budget has grown in 4 years. So approximately $1 million a year. When we look at that, it's a 35% increase in spending. Inflation during that time has been 18%. So we have been growing at about double the rate of inflation on the size of our budget over those 4 years.
And this is linked to the 15.7 million numbers linked to the current and expanded service budget that town manager brought to us at the very start. That, well, you may not be able to see it because I'm sharing my screen, but the very big binders you see us carrying around, that was what came to us in April. So with that, Leo, you want to talk about the different proposals we have before us now?
Yep, and I just asked Dan to add this one slide because for me anyway, last Monday when we were seeing the presentation, all of this information was in there in some form or fashion, but I remember I got sort of stuck on the tax assessment section where it spelled out that the municipal budget decrease of 461,000. And I thought that might be confusing to people that, either missed the beginning or were just coming in and we're seeing, that we've got a decrease in our budget is how I think it could have been interpreted. And maybe I'm the only one kind of reading it that way. So I asked for this slide to show that the initial budget proposal we received grew our budget by $1.6 million. And where we're at now, we are still growing our budget by basically $1 million from last year to this year. So I just thought that was important to kind of put a pin in, because again, if someone had come in or was half paying attention and just saw that, oh, our budget's going down, that is not the case. We are asking less from taxpayers because of the big increase which we'll go through, that we've received from the state. So that is absolutely accurate. Just I felt that it could be a little disorienting. So I asked that we add this specific slide in just to kind of put a pin in that.
The next couple of slides quickly capture where we are, in terms of personnel. And sorry to do that to you. We've added, going back 10 years, Orono has grown in size in terms of personnel by 19 positions, about 28% growth over 10 years. And as we've heard a couple times already this evening, it's hard to find people, and it's a big driver of cost, because we value our people and we want them to be, get the benefits they deserve and the pay they've been promised. And service organizations like municipalities are going to continue to struggle with keeping those commitments and keeping staff sizes together. And it's a big driver. And that's a big part of the conversation. And one of the key observations that we had as a council, we may have, as we look at the personnel, I mean, if you add up all the wages, benefits, and professional services that Orono expends funds on as part of the, our initial budget documents, about 59–60% of our funding goes to personnel costs. And those costs have increased about twice the rate of inflation over the last 4 years. I'll also say, when we first started talking about budget priorities, we started looking at FY21, and through conversations we had with with Sophie and collaboration, we took it back to FY20, because FY21 is kind of an aberration because of the pandemic. The things, we didn't have a pool during COVID, so those costs, we didn't have those costs, and it made the budget, budgets and things like that look different. So instead of starting from a point where we were artificially, are we missing something?
No, when you're done, I was going to ask if you minimize that little window.
The window.
Just go click on a little thing just to make it easier for us to read on this.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. I think we still have 9.5 minutes left. Sorry. Sorry. Sarah.
Okay. So the big question Leo already sort of alluded to is, how are we paying for this 4.1 million in increases in our budget over the last 4 years? It has not been showing on your taxes. You'll see that our taxes have only gone up by 596,000 over those 4 years, which is an 11% growth. That's below inflation. So of those increases in the budget, only 14 cents out of every dollar we've added to the budget has needed to be paid for out of your taxes. And Dan is going to explain to you why it didn't all come out of your taxes.
Big reveal is Governor Mills and the legislature restored revenue sharing to its statutory cap of 5%. So this was a story in the Bangor Daily News in August of 2022. The state has been funding revenue sharing at 5%. It was at 3%. It's been lower than 3% of its obligations. Revenue sharing, a big driver after property taxes. It's the second largest revenue that the town of Orono receives. So when we look at,
you or me? So you can see here that at the same time that our budgets were going up by the 4.1 million, what was paying for that is that the state money was also going up, actually quite steeply. So up by 3.1 million over those same 4 years, which is a huge amount of growth. You'll see it's a 252% growth, very fast and very big. And that was wonderful for us. And it allowed us to pay for that growing services and budget. 75 cents out of every dollar that we increased our budget was covered by the money coming in from the state. See that at the bottom.
Now, if you took out the $3.1 million in revenue sharing that's been restored by returning to the statutory cap of 5%, if you took that $3.1 million out, divided by the projected valuation, projected property value for Orono, you get a mill rate of 5.3. So on an average home, if Governor Mills called Sophie tomorrow and said, I'm sorry, I'm clawing that $3.1 million in revenue sharing back, so we're putting you back to FY21 levels, the cost to the property taxpayer would be $1,250 for every single one of us based on the average valuation of an Orono home with the homestead exemption. So that's been something we've been struggling with because revenue sharing has been such a big component of the increases, that the spending increases in Orono, and making it easy for property taxpayers. And this is an example of what it would be like for property taxpayers if just that revenue sharing increase over the last 4 years went away. Now, revenue sharing returns to reality next year, okay? Municipal revenue sharing is now, the pool is at its 5% maximum of Maine's monthly sales, corporate and personal income tax revenue. So that's just over $250 million. The Orono is going to get $4.65 million. We hope we don't hear from Governor Mills saying she's, I know she won't do it. She's good people, but Orono gets $4.65 million in FY24. It's about 1.85% of that total pool. The state can cut revenue sharing. Done in the past. They've got a history of not paying the whole 5%. And so feel good that the $4.65 million is solid, but there's no more new money coming to fund expenditure growth in communities. The Revenue Forecasting Committee projects municipal revenue sharing is going to grow about 1.7 million, or just 2/3 of 1%. Orono's share of that money, if we got all of the same percentage we get now, would be about $32,000 in new revenue out of revenue sharing for next year. That's not a lot. That doesn't cover sustained,
Can you pause it for a second?
Sure, pause it.
Yeah, I just want to pause there for a second because the number that compares to is that previously each year we've been getting almost $1 million in extra money beyond what we had the previous year for the last 4. And now we're going to get only 32,000 beyond this coming year into FY25.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, please do.
Dan and I talked briefly about the fact that the numbers he's using, which perfectly fine, but they're aggregate numbers between revenue sharing 1 and revenue sharing 2. And one of the things that you can't project. So, I mean, if I was going to do what he was doing for these numbers, I would do it the way he did it. But Orono is a very high receiver of revenue sharing 2. One of the components of that is population and mill rate. So as our mill rate comes down, we are looking, and our tax assessment goes down, we will likely reduce the revenue 2 number. When we have ideas what that will look like, I'll be able to run those numbers based on this year to give you an idea. But I think it's important. Yeah. I just want to make sure you have the whole picture.
Sophie gave me the courtesy of kind of looking through this quickly, but as we talked about today, they're not Sophie certified. We've got that as I've got that written on my wall at home. So to the extent there are errors with these numbers, they're look to me, hold me accountable.
Just to clarify so you're saying reduced from that pot, meaning conceivably 32, maybe. I know it's always hard. It's hard and dangerous to predict what the state's going to do next year. But it sounded like you were saying that it could potentially be less than that. Yeah. Is that what you're saying?
So when we look, if you recall, when we look at my, maybe you guys haven't gone through my budget, not my revenue forecasting there. I try to put the number there. And there are some long-term forecasts available out there, but as we reduce, so we're a very high receiver because we have very little value and full services. So we have a higher mill rate and a higher tax commitment. And if you look at some of the questions that came up earlier in the year that were, why are other communities getting so much less? Have we made a mistake? It's revenue 2 is driving that. We increase substantially more than everybody else. So as we work to become more on par, we will lose that revenue. It's not a reason not to do it. It's just a consideration.
That's really helpful, Sophie. So thanks. And I think it's helpful on this slide I think it's a good pause place because we're about to switch gears and just to notice if Tim has a question.
really simple one. Could you give maybe a quick overview of the difference between revenue sharing programs 1 and 2?
Yep, I can if that's okay.
Sure, please do.
So the revenue sharing program, they take 5% of certain receipts and send it to the revenue sharing program. The state then takes $4 million off the top and puts it in revenue sharing 2. And then it's an 80-20 split of that 5%. So 80% of the money goes for all communities to divide. 20% of the money is designed for service center communities, but it's high service, low value or mill rate. So they have set 11 mills as the minimum mill receiver, and how far you are away from 11 mills on your tax rate increases how much you get.
For those service center communities.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And the idea is a lot of service center communities have tax exempt property, but are still having to provide services for a larger population. So, I mean, we should clean up because we are the Augusta and Orono are the poster children for that scenario. And I would never want to artificially have a high mill rate just so we can get revenue sharing. That doesn't make sense. But I think it's a consideration. If you're thinking we might just be scraping by at break even, we might be having negative revenue sharing, which is something that I want to talk to council about, perhaps doing what smaller towns do, which is establish a revenue sharing fund so that you sweep money to mitigate that.
And in the meantime,
sorry.
So 1 is for everybody. There's a formula based on your population and your tax commitment, your valuation. Rev 2 rolls in that mill rate contribution. So not everybody gets it, and it is far and wide. It is a spreadsheet that truly takes 2 computer screens for me to get through.
And roughly what portions do we receive? X% from 1, Y% from 2?
I had all that, Leo. I don't want to give you
50-50?
No.
20-80?
No, I think
20? Not to the
if you
T.
It's right in your budget binder, I think. I'm not 100%. No, maybe it's not. Never mind.
I'm gonna press ahead with you.
Yeah.
So Sonia?
Sure. So yeah, we found ourselves during this budget process in the, I think, unenviable position of looking at the reality that probably our income is not going to increase the way it has in recent years. And so I think we have had some really serious and hard conversations about how to be looking toward the future and things that we want to do as a community in the future with that being the case. And some of the priorities that there was a fair amount of consensus on amongst this group of sort of fairly diverse elected leaders was to try to limit the growth in our operating expenses to the rate of inflation, trying to keep our commitment to our existing employees, prioritizing the things that bring people in Orono together and that we hear over and over again people really value, including the library and the Parks and Rec program. Trying to invest in being able to support citizen initiatives and things that people have brought to us, including the ski center and other initiatives and ideas, including a small, we have a $10,000 proposed new pot of money for a small grants program to support community initiatives. And then really looking toward planning to a future of public safety and walkability and major projects that we know we want to do, including a Route 2 corridor, sort of expansion and work on that, and other sort of important infrastructure projects related to sewers. And there's a huge long list of priorities that goes under 5, planning toward the future, but we've tried to consider what's coming at us in making some really hard choices in proposing a budget that that reduces our expenditures substantially from what was in this initial one. And so how did we select those priorities for what to include and what to propose cutting out of this year's budget? We started with lists that our staff had presented to us as potential service level considerations to consider. Go ahead.
Yeah, and to be clear, these weren't endorsed by the town, town officials or things like that. These were areas where council had an opportunity. Our budget book is expansive of things like, right down to the dollars we spend to make sure that, people, and I assume, can buy steel-toed shoes, have support for phones and clothing and things that they need. And then so much of it is, as a new counselor, I'm amazed at how little you can change. It's how much of it is contractual, how much of it is just decent to provide to people. So we asked staff to come up with, scenarios. We decided we got the list of, I think it was 24 opportunities, and none of them are particularly great. It was very little that we were just like, yeah, we don't need that anymore. Yeah. But these are just an example of some of the things that we looked at in terms of potential savings.
Yeah, we looked at closing the pool and eliminating a security service at Gould's Landing that we had heard from feedback from staff was important to the residents in that area, and crossing guard, and you can read what else is on here. We thought about eliminating curbside recycling and decided to keep it. We thought about reducing the library hours and decided not to. And the two things that are on this slide, at least, there were a few other things, but some of the biggest ticket items that we did propose initially to cut from this year's budget were to not hire a new electrician, which was a service level increase opportunity that was brought to us by staff and would have had some real advantages, but we chose to not be expanding service in that way. And then the other was to consider reducing our winter maintenance level. And so what this would do is it would add an hour or two to, we would not fill 2 vacant positions in the public works staff. And so this has the advantage of we're not laying off people who already work for us. And there would be, if we reduced the service level, we wouldn't need to buy a new truck. But the obvious downside is that we all enjoy really excellent and wonderful snow plowing in this town, and our public staff works really hard, and those people, of course, are working year round. And so that would be a smaller workforce that wouldn't be able to provide service for weed whacking and other things we rely on during the summer too. So, so a real trade-off. If we end up sort of keeping this reduction in the budget, as we will vote on next week, this would save us $325. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's all I have to say on that.
And here,
I did just want to, can you go back there for 1 second?
Sure.
Just while we're here, wanted to comment on the curbside recycling, because I was all for it, because we were sort of, I think, under the impression that we really didn't know what was getting recycled. We did hear from our vendor and want to very clearly clarify that they have an 84%.
14% residual.
Yeah, so 80% original, so 86% of what we're putting in recycling is actually getting recycled. We really didn't know. We thought it could have been 10 or 20. We had no idea. So just to clarify, our vendor, I think, is doing a fabulous job. And this, I think, once we had that information, was sort of a no-brainer for, I mean, that wasn't even consideration once we knew it was actually going to recycle. So
we got a very nice invitation for a tour too. So
yes.
down the plant.
Rob and I are doing that on Friday.
Oh,
save some time for discussions.
Yep, absolutely. So we're going to move quickly through these next couple, and if that's okay. So this is what it looks like in terms of what came to us as a current expanded budget proposal in April, the big binder. And this is the 15 million one is what looks like after our work and what we talked about last week, what Sophie presented last week. So essentially to the rate of inflation in terms of what this June budget will be. And we're gonna have more conversations about that today. The share, for those that, the share of municipal tax savings for the reduction is about $183. if you factor it out that way. Rob, do you want to talk about commitments to employees and
that number was for an average house?
average house?
Correct.
Yeah, average household.
So that's a $260,000 home with a homestead.
Yep.
235 taxable value.
Yep.
And so in this budget, some of the commitments we have made, in addition to talking about these, cuts we considered and didn't go with, and a few that we did, the things that we are committed to continuing paying for, funding all current employee support and wellness programs. We're not laying anybody off, which is great. Meeting all of our collective bargaining obligations, of course, and also adding an additional $121,000 to fund market-based wage adjustments, hiring agreements, and planned promotions. So all to the purpose of making sure that we're providing a competitive wage and benefit program to people who we want to come work and stay working in Orono based on the recommendation of staff. This is what staff brought to us as something, and we all think that's a great idea and makes a lot of sense. We need to pay people properly and take care of them. And then also included here is full funding for the library, increasing programming for Parks and Recreation, which I know a lot of people are excited about. We've heard a lot about that from folks in the community. And also maintaining our commitments, as we were just discussing, to recycling, as we referenced earlier in this meeting, belonging and diversity, equity, inclusion, public transit, community development, general assistance, public safety staffing levels, all of that is contained in this budget as a commitment that the council has made. Yeah, I guess I can continue on. Oh yeah, you can go for it.
And this was the priority about investing in yes. The idea being here to really encourage citizens, community members to come forward with ideas, good ideas that they want to start. Some of those are funding the parent-initiated youth ski program that was piloted this last year, new resources for the Caribou Bog Center. This is what Sonia mentioned briefly, seed grants for new citizen-initiated community programs. So if you have a good idea, we put a very small little bit amount of money, $10,000 in the council budget. You have a good idea for a new thing in the community that would bring people together, bring that to council, and we have a small pot of money, we can give you a mini grant to try it for a year. Also, some resources just to improve citizen engagement and awareness of what's going on. Staff brought to us an increase in the communications position. Might get the title wrong, Sophie, what's the title of it?
Communications.
Okay, I was close, good. But that would allow us to be sure we're getting really good and timely information out to the community, even beyond what I think has already been a tremendous thing that staff is already doing.
So I just want to be really clear. It's adding, it's
0.4.
0.4. Yep.
It's not a full-time position, right? And they're already doing a tremendous job as is. So this is just a little bump up. Also, there's some ideas that it costs no dollars at all that council will be exploring in the months to come around some community potlucks with the council, some canvassing ideas on a regular basis by council, and hopefully a climate survey that Dan has brought forward to go out to the whole community as an idea.
And finally, just planning for the future. We wanted to, public safety, we understand that the cost there and the staffing there is in the demand and need for professionalism. I mean, our police department is leading to the DEI, this DEIB initiative, which is fantastic. But bringing people together over the course of the next year and heading into our next budget to have really a citizen-informed vision for what public safety needs to be in our town, engaging neighborhoods and stakeholders in walkability, initial steps for better long-term planning, and preparing for transformational investments in the library, our Route 2 corridor, things that really, really have an opportunity to improve Orono for everybody in a very tangible and very, very realistic way. So with that, we want to thank everybody who reached out this past week after the public hearing. I want to thank staff for all their work in the presentation last week and the tremendous amount of patience we've received in terms of our questions. And we thank everybody for their comments and look forward to continuing to work with people and finish this budget process.
Thank you. So I really want to thank Dan, Councilor Demerit, for taking the lead on putting these slides together, and the rest of the council for sharing their thoughts with Dan and then with the rest of us. I think it's important that our budget be a reflection of our values and not just a spreadsheet that sometimes seems a little bit unrelated to the everyday operations. The one thing that I mentioned to Dan today and that I don't have an answer for, we haven't been able to find an answer for, we know that Orono is not an outlier in this. We know that all towns are struggling with this, right? I looked at the Maine Municipal Association website for a while today to try to see what levels of growth are like. Couldn't find that information easily in one place. I couldn't find it with difficulty in many places. So while it is true that we are growing tremendously and that it is a priority of this council to control those costs, I just don't want anybody to leave this meeting thinking that we are unique in the sense that we're growing as a town. So it's something that many municipalities are grappling with, and I really appreciate the real serious look that this council is taking to control those kinds of costs. I think it's the responsible thing to do in both the short term and as Alan said, in the long term. Before we transition into a very particular conversation about the budget, I would like to know if there's any public comment in general about this. Yeah, please.
First of all, I want to thank everybody up here for all the work putting in the managing the town. Sorry, Tim Waring, 24 Winter Haven. I forget to do that. It's just, you know, such a large amount of work goes into running a town, even a small town like ours, and you know the professionalism that's involved, the volunteer work that you put in as counselors is really just appreciated. I just want to say that you know I've been to many town meetings over the years, and just this and sort of getting back into being engaged in town post-COVID and all of the things that new council's dealing with in terms of, you know, coming in mid-cycle. You know, I just want to recognize that, you know, you're in this really tough, you know, hot seat where the, you know, rubber meets the road. And I just want to thank you for being willing to do that on, you know, on the behalf of, you know, town, you know, citizens. I also want to say that this, you know, this work you put together on this this budget, this values-based budget, or whatever we want to call it, is just really, it's been refreshing for me. I've been sort of trying to get back involved in following what town's doing, and you know how we are choosing what we do, and you know, local, you know, government is exciting when you pay attention. And the thing is, it's complicated too, and so it can be hard to pay attention. And so what I want to thank you for is the way in which you worked, even as a new council, under short, you know, timelines, to make it easier to pay attention and to engage. This presentation here was super useful, you know, and I really like that because I can see the way, oh, right, Route 2 corridor, oh my God, yeah, and, you know, a little bit more for Parks and Rec, yes, and, you know, these things where it makes it easy for me as someone who's got, you know, negative time to spend on this stuff, to be able to see the way our community is expressing itself through it. And it just seems like, you know, Orono is such an, you know, it's a dynamic town, and seeing it come through like this, even in a, you know, tricky budget time like right now, is exciting. And so I'm looking forward to how you guys all do it when you have a whole year to, you know, to get your feet on the ground and all of that. But this has been great, and I just want to thank you for the, you know, measured and careful and also really transparent process with the community. Anyway, just thank you. That's really all I'm saying.
I'd like to piggyback on that if I could. Tim stole a lot of my thunder, but no, I appreciate that. I took the words right out of my mouth. I did take the opportunity to watch the last meeting.
Can you just introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Bob Sinclair since 1953. And at 8 Gilbert Street since 1979. So I'm Orono born, Orono bred, and when I die, I'll be Orono dead. Okay, so having said all that, I took the opportunity to watch the last meeting, and I heard some words in that meeting about trust and respect and tone. I got to say that sitting here, the time I've been in a council meeting for a long time, I really respect the way that you're communicating with one another. I do appreciate all the stuff that Tim said about the slides and the transparency and the information. I'm also going to say this. I would like to thank all of you and all the past councilors who've ever done this job, because you have an extremely difficult job in this very, very unique community, a community in which we all love, want to see grow. It's an idyllic place to grow up. It's been a great place to work, and it's a wonderful place to live. So I won't repeat some of the stuff that was said, some of it I don't agree with. But one thing that did come up, and I think it was former Councilor Gordon said a couple things. First of all, he said that it was a extremely very important part of his life to be a town councilor. At the end, he came back and made that statement. I thought that was very, very good and very nice because he put a tremendous amount of time and effort and still is a very good resource. So I would say that I'm not sure that I would agree with that. I think Councilor Spitz said something like, it's a thankless job. So you go from one extreme to the next. But anyway, one thing that I really keyed in on that Jeff did say that I wholeheartedly agree on, and it kind of piggybacks on what we've been talking about here. And his quote was, the Orono tax burden is a significant problem. And that's what he said. And so having heard that, that's why I came tonight and chose to kind of say a few things. I'm a senior, hate to admit it, don't feel like it, but I am. I'm pushing 70, and so therefore I'm retired, supposed to be, and I'm on a fixed income. And so that comes with challenges. You know, you have to kind of redesign your life, and you want to stay in the community that you love. And I've talked to other seniors who have, you know, similar thoughts. We all know it's a problem for tax burdens to go up every year. I also have young families in this community who love Orono. Everything about Orono. Love the schools, they love our town. Great news about pool, by the way. Hallelujah on that. We got some lessons going. I got to get my pool pass for the grandkids because they're going to want to be there. So that's great news. And so just for young families, I know it's a challenge. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It's a challenge to keep food on the table, balance all the increased expenditures around heating costs, electrical costs that are going up. It's tough. No doubt about it. And I suppose somewhere between the young members of our citizens and the elders that people have the same concerns. But I would like to publicly thank this council for trying to seek ways to have tough conversations about how we might begin to give some tax relief to Orono taxpayers. And your last slide, you know, kind of brought that in a visual. For me, I'm a visual learner. You can put a whole bunch of numbers in front of me and I can't make sense of it. But if you put it out in that format, at least for me, I can get it. And so I thank you for doing that. I do feel that the road that we're on at this time is unsustainable. I worry about that. I'm grateful that you have the courage to ask tough questions. Okay, I really am. And I want to just continue to encourage you to continue to listen to all members of the community. I know you will. Continue to learn, to grow, and make thoughtful decisions. And perhaps soon we'll come up with some kind of a plan for the next few years that will help. Because we all love Orono. It's my spiel. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Before we dive into some of the figures that we've been provided by our town manager and town staff this week, are there any more general comments about the budget? I don't want to cut anybody short, but I'm mindful of time. Claire, 1 second.
Margot Lukens. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself when I.
That's all right.
I went to Bozeman, Montana during spring break this year, and that's a town that has snow. And I was shocked to see they leave the snow on the road.
They do in the middle of the road.
Everywhere. It doesn't matter. The reason it's in the middle is when people are driving on both sides, and it's a mess. Bozeman, which is a college town, right? It's a total mess. And I said to my friends with a very, supercilious expression, I live in a town where we have amazing snow service, and it is true. We are so spoiled in some way with our snow service, and I think you're doing the thing you have to do, and it's probably going to be just fine that we are delayed an hour or maybe two in the delivery of snow removal services. So I say, you've done wonderful work, and I support your decision to save that $325,000 by not refilling those two positions.
Okay, Claire.
Oh, I just want to echo what these guys said, that I am slightly the English expression is gobsmacked by the sense I get that we have a council here that is willing to be open to sharing, to transparency, I've been at council meetings, I've lived in this town, not as long as Bob had, but quite a long time. I've been at council meetings that were openly hostile to each other, to us. I've been sworn at. I mean, I developed a very bad attitude about town council, and I love Orono. I've lived here a long time. I've been a business owner, a parent, a taxpayer. And if this is where we're going, it's like, hooray, this is lovely. I'm really delighted. I think the more public involvement that you get, the more it will grow, the better it becomes. And some of us may be way off the mark, and some of us may be, you know, have our own little axe to grind. But overall, the idea that we have a council that is as open and apparently amicable as you all appear to be. You may just be putting on a good act for all of us, but you're doing a lovely job. And I want to say, you know, thank you. Great.
Thank you. All right. Well,
we have a comment online.
Yes, please.
This is Lisa Buck.
Lisa, can you hear us?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Let's go ahead, please.
Okay. I live at 9 Kell Street. And again, everybody has said how wonderful it is that you guys are willing to volunteer your time to do this. I too have been an elected official in the past, and I can appreciate the difficulty in drawing up a budget because there's no way to make everybody happy. I do have a concern about a delay in the timing of plowing because there are many people here that commute into Bangor, and that could pose a problem. I don't, have a good solution for you on how to handle this, but I think it is something to be mindful of. Our snow conditions here are changing. Everybody's aware of that. It seems like we get a lot more wet, mushy, icy yuckiness. And I'm just concerned about how to keep the excellent snow removal that we have here. Snow removal is an art form here, intact. And again, thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Nadine Jones.
Nadine, can you hear us?
Gonna allow her to speak. She should be all set to go.
Nadine.
You're still muted though.
No, I'm afraid we can't hear you.
Okay, how's this?
Yep, much better.
Okay, I think I sent an email to all of you today. It's been a hard few last years with Orono and our services. I mean, I own the house, I rent to upstairs, I have to pay $25. And no, that's not a lot of money, and I don't mind paying it, but really, why should I live in my house to rent the upstairs apartment and pay $25? That's my first point. My second point is I really, really appreciate the new council and coming up with new ideas, period. But I'm concerned. I really am concerned about our taxes continue to grow in Orono. I'm concerned that we don't have people looking out for us, our senior citizens. I think probably David and I are the last of the senior citizens, maybe Bob Sinclair, I don't know. But my husband's 84 years old. But we need your help and your support to listen to the new council. And please, please continue to look out for seniors and our tax rate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have, is there anybody else online? Sophie? Okay. I would give it a fair amount of thought to how to structure this conversation. It is our last evening together to talk about this. And I thought maybe one way to do it would be to address both of our budget handouts individually And then we can do sort of a synthesis moment where we wrap the budget back up. So the first document I'd like to talk about, just as a way of clarifying the budget for us, is budget. Sophie provided us with a budget summary and comparative tax rate document going back 2020 to 2024 with percentage differences. And I found this really, really helpful. There are extra copies available if people need extra copies. I just want to make sure that no one on council has any questions about this particular document before we move on. One of the things we've asked staff about is to provide us with these multi-year trends. And this document to me seemed to very clearly, I could compare years very clearly using this document.
And this is the same document that Dan used to create the PowerPoint that was presented. So
right.
People have seen the summary of this data already.
Okay. Good. I didn't want to leave it on the table and have any questions about it. The other major document that we were provided was the post-budget hearing budget scenarios document. And this is 5 different budget scenarios, largely dealing with changes to funding based on different service levels.
I think it might have changed without paying for this. Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. So do you want to grab a hard copy?
Is there hard copies up there of that too?
Will you grab me one of those too? Thanks, Dan.
I'm sorry, I thought everybody.
Well, we have it, but it's a head tilt to look at it on the computer. So we're head tilting over here.
You do
Love a hard
download
copy.
the new thing.
Sorry, I can tilt my head.
All good.
We've heard a ton of really valuable feedback on many of these scenarios. We have asked Sophie and staff to provide us with different scenarios. I think maybe a really helpful place to start in a way to kind of winnow down through this document is to see if there are any of these which are patently unacceptable to the majority of council. And then we can take some of those out of our discussion. We don't have to waste time.
I could speak to item D, maybe to column D.
Okay.
This is the one that I would be least interested in. I don't want to see us taking money away from our capital facilities to move toward personnel. I know we've been listening to Sophie a lot about building up sustainable levels on infrastructure, equipment, and facilities, each year so that we maintain those and we don't create spikes for taxpayers. And I think we're currently right at the numbers Sophie had suggested. We're at about 800 something on infrastructure, 450-ish on equipment, and about 335 on facilities, which are right on line with what Sophie gave us for those benchmarks. And I don't want to see us shift money away and kick the can down the road on capital issues. So I'd like to eliminate D.
Agreed.
I'll third that.
So it seems like we can sort of move that one. We can always revisit these, but we can maybe simplify these.
So for people who don't have the document, that is taking the presented budget, adding back the 2 public works positions, funding those, and removing a public safety capital project.
Right.
That project won't happen until we get the feedback from the consultant anyway, right? So yeah.
That would be the cart and the horse.
Yeah, I agree. I thought so. I just wanted to.
I would also say that we had a great deal of discussion about option C, which was adding back the 2 positions and the public works truck last week. And I don't want to open old wounds or anything, but it seemed to me that the council was moving away from that option. So if I have that wrong, let me know.
Nope. I think you have it right.
So given that we now have 3 potential options, which ones do people like the best?
I'm going to come out first for option A, which is as presented. I know that we all obviously understand this, but we're talking about positions here. And I just think we have to take advantage of attrition and unfilled positions, because we would not even entertain this we won't entertain this conversation if we were talking about individuals. So and again, just because of this all comes back to the trend that we've seen, $1 million a year increase on the budget. We've kept pace with the state revenue. That's going to level off. I don't see how we have anything less than $1 million increase in the budget next year, and that's going to come straight from taxpayers. And I just think, that's a burden that a lot of people are not going to stomach.
Can we ask about? I like that principled approach and what we saw, the graphs and the trends and things like that. I would like to hear what, and I appreciate the work staff did to think about what an option E would present if we were able to, except, a big part, and I think to apologize or put in context some of the questioning that we've had over the past several weeks, been me trying to find middle ground for people, a safe place for everybody to land. So this walkability discussion where let's pass a constitutional amendment, making it walkable in Orono, me just trying to see what would stick. And I think that added a level of complexity and inquiry to our discussions that maybe now that I'm a learned counselor, I'm gonna maybe not offer up quite so much. But I'd like to hear that kind of put, all right, the elimination of the position, not funding the positions, and then having a discussion about walkability after the fact, so we could, provide some insight or get some feedback from stakeholders. But what are the opportunities that option E presents for us over this next year if we have a conversation about, and thank you for putting it together. Now, if you could.
Dan, did you say at the beginning, for anyone who's not looking at the paper, that option E is adding one?
Adding option E adds back one of the public works positions.
Thanks.
So I'd like to hear about how it helps with contingency. I'd like to how it helps keep, in those storms where we really need it, a fifth truck on the road, even though it's not a perfect truck or a brand new truck. And I'd like to hear that.
Yeah, so I think the real core of the answer would be that you would have as much impact as not having to, but you would still be impacted a little bit, I guess. I think depending on how we land, if I were to keep priorities for winter maintenance, or are we shifting some staff around to address other priorities that council would, obviously have some time between now and then to decide. But ultimately, yeah, a little bit more contingency for illness and injury, a little bit more contingency for some of the larger storms, but still obviously less than what the last season with a fully staffed group was able to deliver. The issue with the truck is that it is to the point where this past summer, we welded the body back together so that it wouldn't fall off the truck. So there's, we're continuing to maintain that truck and keep it and make sure it's safe for the road and all of the things that obviously minimum standards meet, but there's not a lot of life left in that truck to deliver the level of service that we need that truck to do. So my concern about not, expecting that vehicle to be available, first of all, and maybe it's broken down with some significant mechanical issue, we would be coming back to you to say, we're going to invest in this or not. But also the delay that it's going to, right now, 18 to 24 months is the delivery period on a new vehicle. So trying to plan ahead at the same time to say, if we're going to need that vehicle as part of our fleet moving forward, there's concerns about delaying that purchase for a year. So there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of babies that we can give you, but I mean, it really is, on a continuum of what the impacts to the level of service are. It's less than limiting 2 positions, but not staying at the level that we're at now.
And I think one of the things that's so hard for us is that we were delivering services in a different way when we had a similar staffing level, and safety for the community and the employees caused us to go to that split shift, which we came and we said, we need these two people to be able to do that. So when you're asking Rob to look into his crystal ball for what the service delivery is going to look like, and he says, well, I'm compressing 5 routes into 4 routes, and I can tell you at 2.5 miles an hour, this distance will take an hour. That hour is going to look different in different storms and different timing. It's going to impact people differently. And I don't, you know, we've said a few times, you know, that staff absolutely recognizes that this is a council decision, and it's one that our job is to try to make work whatever you decide. But when you take out 20% of the workforce, and I was really kind of concerned when we started talking about kind of improving walkability while we're decreasing resources. And what I don't want to do is raise expectations here and deliver here for so many reasons. But I think if everybody is understanding that the decision about services and tax rate, that's why you guys don't get paid the big bucks. And I think that just the concern is, number one, giving the opportunity for planning, and also understanding that this goes with lots of risks.
Can you speak? We talked a little bit about like attrition in these positions too. So, you know, I think one of the concerns was, you know, if we found a compromise, it kind of got us, you know, instead of a 20% reduction in force, a 10% reduction in the available force, keep a fleet, a vehicle in the fleet. We could press into service as we needed, assuming we could keep it welded together and safe and everything. Yeah. So, excuse me. The expectation is there's no promising in this, but I mean there is turnover in that workforce too. So if we're back here in the next budget cycle and say we have this as our staffing level target, there's as apt as not to be an opportunity to address a position that's vacant, perhaps
So, you know, anytime you bring somebody into the town, we invest a lot of energy and resource, and we want them to stay, not forever, but for a nice long career. But in Public Works and WPCF, we've seen that we have a core group of incredibly talented, skilled, dedicated professionals that allow us to get the work done. And there's one position in WPCF, and there are 2 in Public Works that we seem to lose through attrition. So when you and I talked about that, my point was simply, there are some positions that you hire people into here and you don't expect them to move for 5 or 6 years. That's even changing in the workforce dynamic, though. You don't get the longevity in many places that we have historically seen. So that I would expect that we would likely see some attrition in Public Works. I think what would be important, and I think Rob and I have kind of floated this idea a few times, I floated it with you again, is the idea that knowing ahead of time what the long-term goal is, and you know, giving staff, this is the 5-year goal. How do we get to here? That allows the team to go back and say, here are some options, because you need the capital to support the service. You need the people to support the service. If we knew that there was a goal to reduce staff by 10%, I'm making numbers up, I'm not suggesting anything, that we could begin to think about cross-training, reducing service level, technology, things like that. There are some places that I can't do that. I can't increase technology in Public Works to reduce the need for Rob's skill set and his team. And, you know, I think it's important just to note that Public Works, we've talked a lot about winter road maintenance, but it's everything else. We had 2 people out with brown-tail moth exposure, and it pretty much stopped our mowing efforts cold, and that doesn't look great. And they were right back at it, but it means there might be times that we can't do things. And when we think about supporting the community doing more things, Rob's team is the team that sets up, breaks down, makes sure that all of our staff have spaces and places that they can be. Public Works, I think the community sees a lot of the external stuff, and his team does such a great job. But internally, Public Works is a driver for allowing us to get a lot of stuff done.
I think Rob had talked about discussions on priorities, and I think that is not immediately, obviously, but I think that is a good thing that we should do. And I'd like to think that we could send it out. I've heard of neighboring communities that actually send out, again, with our stress on trying to be over communicating, sending out what that priority map looks like down to the road by road. I think would be a good mission for us to accomplish this summer. Does the facilities staff have a role, or could they have a role with regards to snow removal?
They do.
They already do.
They already do.
Okay.
So we have
2 staffs of 5. We would be going to 2 staffs of 4. Are they included in that?
No. So it's 4 plus how many facilities people involved?
So we have a person that works downtown and does the, I guess, downtown proper, Pine to Main to Mill. And then another one who helps with, they're the one, so the custodial, they do the custodial work, but they're also out, they shovel the walkways and things like that. So no. Because I don't have anybody, when we're plowing, we don't have anybody to support the facilities. So it's the shoveling the walkways, salting, and making sure, you know, while public buildings are open, like the library and the town office.
Yeah, personally, the option here that I am preferring is option E, which does add back in 1 public works staff position that I think I trust Rob could make good use of another person at all times of year for contingencies and in creative ways. And to me, that I've really appreciated first the feedback that I've received from people in the community on this issue, both in favor of reduced taxes and in favor of maintaining snowplow level. I've heard a lot in both categories, and it's not easy to make this decision. And I know that there will be people who are unhappy and complain to us this winter if snowplow levels are reduced, but I personally am willing to take that. And I also think adding a person to the mix would be a smart step in contingency sort of ability for the team.
Rob, I had a question from a resident this week that I think I answered correctly, but I might have been wrong. That while we plow the RSU lots, this is the RSU maintenance staff that does their snow blowing on their sidewalks and things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I had. Yes, go ahead.
There, Rabbi Benjamin Gorelick, I'm a limited citizen. I've been here for a whole month. I do want to thank all of you for all of the work that obviously has gone into all of this. As you know, someone who's very new and kind of like walking into the door, I guess I just want to say that somebody is new here, and taxes and all of these issues, you know, are at the heart of, you know, some long-term sustainability questions for me too. I would strongly encourage you, this council has now had a $4 million increase, it sounds like, over roughly 4-year period to work with and to be sitting here discussing, like, that we, like barely have enough to, kind of like make that seems like a challenge that, that we can figure out how to face as a community. And, it's like, we are all aware of, everybody and everything is, kind of making it, but kind of making it. And so I really encourage this council to continue to like look at ideas, but understand that, it's like, I lived in Alaska for 18 years, like we managed to figure out how to deal with, snow and ice every day in ways. And, like Anchorage, Alaska is a 24-hour clean out policy, not a 2-hour clean out policy. And it doesn't seem to affect, emergency services and things like that. Speaking of, she's not there. Montana. I just want to encourage you to figure out how to be like very, very like things that you don't need. Had a surplus for a while. It sounds like there's not a surplus long after I really, it's like, like part of living here and part of being a citizen of this community. Again, just from the get-go, it's making sure that it's affordable and accessible to everybody. That is the most important thing, is that like people can afford to live here. And so like, there are other ways to figure out other things. If somebody gets sick and we have to deal without lawn mowing or weed whacking for a week in the summertime, like the world will continue to spin. If somebody, gets hurt and, and snow plowing takes 3 hours instead of 2, like, again, the world will continue to spin. If I can have a home here, like those are, like trade-offs that all of us have to make. And, it's like, I know it's hard. I totally appreciate like all of the work that has gone into this, but like, if you have the chance to, scale some of these things back out of the surplus that has been here, that is not going to be here anymore, really, really encourage you to do that while maintaining. I love the commitments to like keeping everybody fully employed to doing that. And then you have a year you can, it's a disaster this winter, something like that, or, as, other positions shift, I don't know what the total town, employee is, say there's 80 employees in town. Shift one from this office here to that office there, like that's a thing that you can do too. But really think about ways to give us what we need so that we can live here. That is lost in all of these other swims. We have to look forward just to be here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Was there another hand? I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much for listening.
Okay. So we haven't talked about option B. I'm not advocating for option B, but I want to make sure that we're not forgetting. Option B would be adding in 2 positions, but not with the purchase of the new vehicle. So still a compromise, but less of a compromise. I just want to be clear that we're covering all the options.
I was curious on that one. If we maintain those 2 positions, as Leo said, that means if we were to ever consider those positions, well, we really wouldn't want to consider cutting those once we actually have people in those positions. We don't want to fire people. In what way would that not entail still needing to purchase the same truck? We're just delaying that same purchase by a year or something. Is there? I know you and I had a brief discussion about that.
I think when I was talking to you about it, what I said was, well, it would maintain our service level for 1 year. All it would be doing is pushing that truck off, maintain the service level for 1 year while we had this broader discussion that I think Dan and Sarah and other people had really advocated for. However, in a way, it's sort of a mirage, right? I mean, we're maintaining the service level only as long as we can keep a truck on the road. And we may evaporate that level of service anyway in the next budget cycle. So while it is a compromise, it is a compromise that allows us to maintain the current level of service for 1 year. It doesn't go to the heart of what's driving this conversation, which is, can we afford to maintain this level of service, right? It just kind of pushes that conversation away.
Thank you. So, I was one of the counselors who really wanted to maintain the current service level. And yet obviously, you know, I share all the concerns that, you know, we just presented to the public, and, you know, I have those same values. And I think that the option at this point, having gone through this process and been considering this particular issue and getting lots of feedback on this from both directions the last several weeks, especially, I think E meaning presenting, adding back one public works position. Right now, I think that is most attractive to me. It gives us a little bit of room to see what that impact is going to look like in real terms. Obviously, that is a cut that would mean that we don't have the same maintenance service level as, you know, Rob put it. But I think it gives us some wiggle room to see sort of what that means, because regardless, you know, that's something that Public Works can do a lot of good with, I'm sure, but it doesn't commit us in the same way to the truck and the additional person. So it gives us a year, I think, to see what that looks like. And then it gives us the option to add back in. Whereas if we add everything in right now, if we were to do option C, where we fully restored what was in the original budget, it's much harder to scale that back than to add stuff. I think E seems responsible while still taking into consideration the concerns that have been raised by people who are worried about the cut to winter service level. I think, you know, this gives a little bit back and mitigates some of the harm that might be done to winter service level that people are, you know, I think rightly concerned about. That seems like a compromise that I'm willing to work with.
So we haven't heard from you. If you have strong opinions on one or the other, or
no, I don't think I do. I'm comfortable with the two that are left. I can understand the appeal of either of them.
Which two? E?
A and E are all that's left right now, right?
Well, we haven't. No, B. Yeah, we haven't kicked out B. Yeah.
Oh, I thought we just eliminated B. Somebody in favor of B?
Let us, if we're an A and E, that's.
I thought we were down to A and E.
I will say I'm in favor of B. I can live with E. I mean, my preference is to allow people to, you know, I mean, my preference is to keep a great service that we have. The understanding that we could revisit this and we're not making a huge capital investment that's going to lock us into maintaining this service level for the next 5 years. I get the sense that that's not where we're trending. So the option that I think I could easily live with is option E, which adds in one of those positions back and allows Rob the flexibility to structure his crew in the way that he thinks is going to be the best for maintaining access around the town. And I don't want to like say more than that, because I think he's got to look at the people he has, the equipment he has, and make the best decisions that he can, right? So while I like B the best, I suppose I could live with E.
And I think I suggested E a long time ago, and I still think that's a great option. And I think that it does respond well to the feedback that I've gotten from the community, which sounds similar to what other people have gotten, which has been very split, like very 50-50. The people that are more concerned about taxes coming down and the people who are more concerned about the plowing not decreasing at all. So I feel like it's also a good response back to all of folks who've come and participated and written in and raised their hands and shared. It feels like an in-between place. So I think that would be fine. How about Dan? Where are you?
I could go along. I prefer E. I could definitely go along with B. I mean, I like that we've heard from a lot of people. E seems like a good, sensible compromise and gives this council more time to kind of establish those longer term projection, things that Sophie and Rob and the department heads are going to need. From our perspective and this council's perspective. So I could vote for B, and I appreciate the work that went into all those discussions. I prefer E.
Okay. I want us to be clear that if we agree, and I don't want to leave you out of the conversation.
I already spoke. I could live with E if that's where the direction is going.
If we adopt option E and staff gets a huge number of complaints, comments, and concerns, I want us to own that.
Yeah,
direction
to us. Already did raise our hand that they can can come through to us.
Direct them to us. Just did our job.
As a question, if we, if you had done E, does that mean that we would still keep the, like last legs truck on the road this year, or we would try to take the last legs truck off the road this year and see what the actual impact is?
Well, I think we would defer to Rob, and he might look at situations and storms and yeah.
Yeah, I can see us maybe a little bit of a hybrid approach where when we know we're going to need that extra resource out there, we'll bring it out, but try to use it sparingly so we don't destroy it. So I can see it probably hitting that somewhere in the middle.
It's clear.
I just want to say that these are almost impossible questions. This is splitting the baby down the middle. It's impossible. We all want perfect services and lower taxes. I more than anybody, but I think that part of the way to address this is to be as open and as clear I'm clearly behind the curve on getting information. I'm going to get better at finding out about agendas and reports of council meetings because I live in a information vacuum. You're not on MSNBC, so I'm not watching you. But anyway, when I fix that and I realize there's better information out there than I am getting, the more that we learn, if the people who want to be able to get out at 6 a.m. every morning on a perfectly cleared road, hear that the reason they can't do that is because hard decisions were made and that what sacrifices, I think we can live with things better if we understand them better. And just to hear people complaining that the truck used to come by at 5 in the morning and now it's not there till 7. And if the information is out there that we've been spoiled and we're going to have to live with a little bit less because the only options are cut back a little bit or raise taxes, we can process that better. So the more you can tell us how and why we're having to wait for the snowplow to come by, the better we'll be able to deal with it, the less bitching there'll be, we hope, by people. And there's all sorts of other options people have. I'm sure that there are small towns in Maine that have crummy road clearing services, and more residents have a plow on the front of their truck. More people find ways to get around it. More people have a neighbor with a big 4-wheel drive that can get them out to where they need to be. The option isn't suffer or have perfect services. There are adjustments that we can all probably make if we understand what we're being faced with.
You could put that in a Facebook post, I think it'd be really helpful. It's like the perfect comment for like how difficult these decisions are and what we have to do to help people understand them, I think.
I want to retire from working and put a new roof on my house. I can't do both. And we have to, all of us, make those choices. It's really hard. And I think the fact that everybody in this town has to make those decisions personally will be better able to understand it if you realize it's just the same here, and we can't have a town that provides everything we want and without the crappy tax base that we've got.
I apologize to the chair for engaging. Yes.
We have a resident that would like to speak.
Yes, please.
Catherine?
Catherine, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, speak up a little bit, please.
Okay, hold on. Catherine Thibodeau, 37 Broadway. I have a couple different comments and I'm going to try to make them all right now so I don't speak again. I really appreciate since I've used these two words several times, the tenor and tone of this meeting, the engagement with both the members of the public and with our town employees. I really appreciate the acknowledgement that operational decisions and operations lay with the employees. I would be remiss to not point out, I think E is great middle ground. I support that, but what I would be remiss to not point out is that The reality for some citizens in our town is that it isn't a choice or a decision. It isn't being spoiled to leave our home at 6 a.m. Some of us have essential employment. We provide essential services. And some of us fiscally have no option other than to report to work, whether there's a snowstorm or not. And some of us are not able-bodied to be able to navigate uncleared sidewalks and have very limited ability to be nimble and creative when it comes to how we move around our community. So, and I specifically in that context, I'm speaking to people with physical disabilities. And so I appreciate the consideration of trying to find that middle ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
I have a question for perhaps for Paul Smith. Guy and I live in. Question for Rob about ordering this truck. It takes 18 to 24 months to get the thing, and we're working with a truck that's being welded together. It seems if we're going to be looking into the future and making plans for the future, it seems to fly in the face of that to stall on getting the order in for this thing if we're expecting the old one to last that long. So, and furthermore, I expect if it's taking that long to have a snowplow truck delivered, if we got into it about a year from now and decided, no, we can't afford that thing after all, I imagine that order could be canceled and somebody else would be willing to scarf up that snowplow, but that's just a second order thing. The main point is, sounds like now is the time to put that order in the budget and get that truck order looking to the future.
Assuming we're not getting too much more into the operational, but we have 4 10-wheelers. We have, I know the loaders are used for the parking lots, but I don't know that we are getting into all of that. So with theoretically 4 people, someone may be in a different, and you also mentioned some of the smaller trucks that plows that do the smaller streets. So theoretically, there could be the 3 10-wheelers going and then some other piece or pieces of equipment that have plows or loaders that are also on the beds.
Rob, do you have the answer to Paul's question right now about if you order one of these trucks, can you cancel that order before it comes or not?
You would have to you'd end up reselling it. But I mean, really, for practical purposes, if we ordered the truck now, decided a year from now that we didn't want to have that 4th route, we would sell the old truck and the next one up and keep the new one. So we could still manage our fleet that way.
Because then the next one up is due in.
Because there's one on your 5-year plan to replace the 2016. So those are always in cycles somewhere. So I guess that would be kind of the worst case scenario.
So I just want to be clear that making a decision to purchase a truck, even if you said it's not going to come for 2 years, so we're not going to appropriate the money today, we'll appropriate it 2 years from now or a year from now. The problem with that is the way the financial statements work, you are going to encumber that cost, whether you budget it or not. So you can do it as a shift of fund balance, but it has to be encumbered. Thanks. Did I say something wrong?
No, it's kind of, sometimes I don't say things I think are going to be funny and they're not going to be as funny as I thought.
Good catch.
I'm happy that I didn't say it. Yep. It was in the best of intention, but it wasn't going to work. So
I get it.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
I did.
Oh, okay.
That was my question.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. So keeping in mind, we have not addressed directly the online feedback that we received this week. It is on our agenda to talk about. I don't want to pull individual comments out.
So that was not the intent.
No,
the agenda intent, Jeff, was each of the numbers.
Yes. Okay.
Were the item that we needed to talk about, and the bullets were just trying to put everything in one place for you.
Yeah, I think I spoke wrong. What I don't want anybody to think, I don't want anybody who sent in comments online to think that we had not considered them.
Yeah.
It is not my intention to go through them one at a time. I don't think that would be really helpful for our budget process, although I think it's really helpful for our process as a council to consider them. So keeping in mind the feedback that we've received tonight, the feedback we've received in the past, the feedback we've received online, it does seem like there is a consensus on council to move forward with option E. However, and if we give you that direction, is that the direction that you need to go forward?
Yeah, I mean, what I need is what you want to show up in the budget orders, not the dollars and cents, but what needs to be represented. It just gets more difficult to start peeling those budget orders apart on the floor. So the goal here is to have some consensus as to what people are going to do.
I like E. So, yeah. E sounds good to me.
Consensus on E. And I do want to echo what Jeff said about the feedback that folks submitted on the online form. I read all of that feedback. I assume everyone else did too. And it was really valuable and was part of this decision. So thank you so much for weighing in, and you folks who are here as well.
Folks here and people in person have been approached this week, as I'm sure most have. So appreciate everyone's input and feedback.
This has been such a robust process. I'm really grateful to all of you and everybody here for putting in all of your time and our time to do the best we can here.
Agreed. Very grateful.
All right, let's move on to Roman numeral 2, which is the fee schedule. Okay.
So we went through the changes to the fee schedule. Just because it was adopted last year doesn't mean you have to just accept. I just focused on the changes to the fee schedule. The thing that I had changed in the fee schedule that you have based on the comment at the public hearing was eliminating the increase in the return check fee. So that's back at $15 as opposed to $25. So that would include the sewer fee increase and the other minor things. That good?
Any discussion on the fee schedule? Okay.
We went through the village district plan and assessment of $0. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. And then I sent out, and let me tell you what we've done historically, and you can decide what you want to do next. So there are lots of orders that come with adopting the annual budget. And some of the things I'm working on right now is to try to present the orders a little bit differently. I know that Leo has some desires to kind of see it mesh more with what you've seen, where in previous years that you pulled everything apart to show it a different way. But we normally do the approval of the budgets, wastewater, sewer use fees, capital investment plan, fee schedules, all on the new business. And then everything on your list from 7 down is usually in consent. And so the first thing I want to do, these orders are really important to Nancy that they be organized. So if we want something off consent, now is the time to kind of do it. If you have questions about it, I can answer some of those questions. But for example, authorizing me to pay the county tax, honestly, you have no choice. Authoring me to pay the RSU tax, you have no choice. The program, the Orono Village District Development Program boundaries, if you're okay with that, that's pretty boilerplate. Go down further, yeah.
You're starting at 7 and working down from 7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go up. No, it's a link. Go down. Go down. There. See where it says
IT support in live in person. This is
There
what
you go.
service level is all about right here.
Bottom one, right. Yep. There you go. Brand new agenda format for you.
I love this agenda format, by the way.
I'm just trying to figure out how to get it to the public.
Yeah,
that running into some issues with that. Property tax, I'm staying with the normal schedule, which is it's due the last day that the town office is open. Interest starts the next day. The state establishes the rate of interest that is charged on taxes, the maximum and the minimum that can be paid on abated taxes. So the maximum this year is 8%. The minimum that we can pay if we have to refund an abatement, usually that's with some kind of agreement or is 4 percentage points less than that. So what you see is I've established it at the highest level of interest, which is Orono's history. One of the things that towns find when they drop that amount, it's cheaper to not pay your property tax than to pay other of those things. So we usually go with the highest. Every year that the statute requires that you do the authorizing the tax collector to accept money before tax commitment. So we have some people that will come in before we actually commit taxes to begin paying on their taxes. Without that, I wouldn't be able to accept it, and we would have to pay that 4% without this order. So that's an important one. I just talked about the 4%. That is the minimum we can pay. The next one is requiring that we allocate funds to the oldest tax that is due. And that's important for a variety of reasons, and has saved many towns by doing that. We have to separate sewer and taxes. So the next order is just sewer. Same idea, the oldest sewer bill is what gets paid first. Number 16, you're simply saying, whatever you say you're going to charge for sewer, you're going to, for taxes, you're going to charge for sewer for delinquent. Every year we put the acceptance of our annual contribution from the state of Maine. This is the hazmat reimbursables line that it's all operational expenses. You see the expenditures that are over the purchase authority, but other than that, we allocate, we need little paper suits. That isn't a reimbursable. If you notice, that's gone from $15,000 to $25,000. So indicative of more commitment from the state. The next one, 18, is one that you're authorizing me to carry forward prior approvals, authorizations, and remaining appropriations for projects that were funded through special revenue, grant reserve, or TIF funds that have not been completed as of June 30th. There's one order on here that I think we skipped, and I apologize. No, it's order 6, authorizing me to adjust the tax increment financing district expense budgets and their use of the restricted funds simply for the calculated credit enhancement agreement, because we won't know what that is until after the budget is adopted. We put numbers in there, but it will deviate. And the last one, at the end of each year, we sweep what is remaining in capital infrastructure funds that are not payables into the fall. So for expenses accrued in this fiscal year that get paid out in the fall, we sweep all of that into the capital equipment, capital infrastructure reserve budget. Council, then Rob comes back with a proposal for how to allocate the funds that are left in that. Sometimes the reason we do that is we really can't start design work on a project until we know it's funded. When you're talking about design, bid, and completion, it can be a long time before you actually encumber that money. And Stuart Dexter, who's not here today, but is usually had been a real voice, really got mad when we carried forward that money because he felt like what we were saying is that we were overtaxing people. So instead, we sweep it into the reserve. Once it's in the reserve, the only way to access it is through council votes. So that's what I've got. And then we've got a couple. The plan is to try to move through that as reasonably quickly, not too fast, but reasonably quickly. And I've got material from Craig Freshley around what you guys started to do with your work plan. So then we would move into a workshop that Jeff would lead you through what to kind of next steps with that.
Good. Just both on the 26th or?
Yep. Mm-hmm. So if we do the consent for the administrivia outside the adoption of the major budget orders, this actually shouldn't take a lot of time, enough time for you guys to say the things you want to say. But at that point, it's usually not a lot of question about the budget.
No more PowerPoints.
So we'll have this, when will we have summary this week, I assume?
Summary.
Summary.
Oh, to reflect the one, probably tomorrow. Great. It might be late because I'm teaching tomorrow. Teaching personnel management.
What do you teach?
I'm teaching personnel management to new town managers.
Oh, good deal.
Excellent. Thank you to everyone who's hung in here all the way to the end. Also, I'm just appreciating.
So before we conclude our workshop, we have one final opportunity for public comment. Okay, seeing none, I want to thank everybody for coming out. Thank you all for your feedback. We are adjourned.
Wingard here.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, thanks, Jeff.